Hi everyone, and welcome to OCD Victory. My name is Matt, and in this video I want to cover my 9th step for overcoming OCD, which is exposure and response prevention. Now, so what is exposure and response prevention, or as some people call it, ERP? ERP is basically the idea of exposing yourself to whatever it is you're afraid of, and then preventing yourself from reacting in a compulsive manner. Okay, and so it's this idea of I have the obsessive thought, and then I prevent myself from engaging in my compulsive behaviors. And what ERP really does is it allows your mind to experience this phenomenon called habituation, right? And the best way I can explain habituation is the idea of jumping in a cold pool, right? And something that most of us have probably done at some time or another in our life. But when you jump in a cold pool, you immediately get that shock to your body. That like, oh man, that's freezing. And you initially you want to get out of the water, right? And the problem is, if you get out of the water, then the next time you jump in, the water is going to be just as cold, right? But if you stay in the water and you let your body just experience the cold water, eventually what happens is you get used to it. You habituate to it, right? And that same process is virtually what takes place with OCD, with overcoming OCD, is if you let yourself actually experience the fear and experience the anxiety, the worry and doubt, what happens is you kind of habituate to it, and you get over it. You become dull to it. It doesn't impact you anymore. So this idea of an obsessive compulsive cycle, basically what it's like doing, it's like jumping in a cold pool, and every time you engage in a compulsive behavior, it's like getting out of the pool real quick and then jumping back in, getting out and jumping back in, right? But when we're talking about ERP, what we're really asking you to do is to jump in the pool and just let yourself sit there and get used to the water, right? And so whatever your fear might be, it's this idea of figuring out how to expose yourself to it, and then removing the compulsive behaviors that are actually perpetuating this obsessive cycle. Now, so as we learned in the White Bears video, the compulsions actually prevent us from habituation. Whether it be the thought suppression or checking or asking for reassurance, all those compulsive behaviors prevent you from experiencing habituation. Now, in this video, what I want to do is I want to cover 4 quick tips for implementing exposure and response prevention to help you overcome OCD if it's something that you struggle with, right? And so the first tip that I want to offer is this idea of you can stop compulsive behaviors, but you can't stop obsessive thoughts, right? And this is the paradox that people often get caught in. So many people ask, how do I get rid of these obsessive thoughts, right? And it's this paradox, because really you can't get rid of thoughts. You can't stop yourself from thinking something. But what you can do is stop doing the compulsive behaviors that you're doing to try to get rid of these thoughts, and then that's going to actually decrease the amount of thoughts that the obsessive thoughts that you're experiencing. It's this ironic process that we talked about in the White Bears video. So the more you engage in compulsive behaviors, the more you're going to experience these obsessive thoughts. So, but what you need to realize is that you can actually stop these compulsive behaviors. And the more you remove these compulsive behaviors from your life, the less amount of obsessive thoughts that you're going to experience. Now, this brings us to the second tip, which is success breeds success with exposure and response prevention. Okay, so it's really important if you're going to be going through this process that you start small. Okay, that you really start with activities that you can accomplish, and then slowly build off them and work your way up to harder exposures. Now, so the idea of this is the whole idea of an exposure hierarchy. You start with small, easy tasks, and you slowly build up and work your way up until you finally overcome your fear. So just to give you a quick example of an exposure, let's take someone who has a contamination OCD, right? And they have a fear of touching doorknobs, right? An exposure for that person might be to actually touch a doorknob and open the door, and then forego their compulsive behavior of washing their hands. Now this exposure is going to cause some extreme anxiety and some extreme worry and doubt in the person's mind. And it does with everyone with OCD. No matter what type of exposure you're doing, it has this huge anxiety spike that follows it. And that's to be expected. You need to expect that that's going to happen. And then when you have that anxiety spike, if you forgo doing your compulsive behaviors, what's going to happen is that anxiety is going to go down naturally on its own, and you're going to show your mind that you really don't need to be afraid of whatever it is you're afraid of. And that's the whole process of exposure and response prevention, like summed up in a few sentences. So it's important to, when you're doing this exposure hierarchy, to pick tasks that you are achievable and then slowly build off each one. Because the more success you have with the smaller task, the more likely you're going to be able to go do the larger task and the more scary exposures if you've already had success climbing that ladder. The next tip is a quote that I heard from Dr. Patrick McGrath at a speech, and he said something I'll never forget. He said, when it comes to exposures, when you say that you can't do something, what you're really saying is you won't do something. And this just stuck with me for some reason, because it was so true. When I was going through my exposure and response prevention, I always would tell, I always would be like, I can't do that, that's impossible. But in actuality, the tasks that I had to do for my exposure and response prevention hierarchy weren't impossible. When I said that I couldn't do something, what I really was saying was that I wouldn't do it, or that I won't do it. And the same holds true for you, and really whatever task you've lined up or have lined up on your exposure hierarchy, you can accomplish these tasks. Okay, they might be very scary, and they might cause a tremendous amount of anxiety, but it is possible for you to do them. And the more you recognize that it is possible for you to do something, the more likely you will be to actually go and do it and engage in it and allow yourself to experience the fear and then eventually overcome OCD. And this brings me back to really the final tip, which is the idea that each exposure is like a little battle, right? And if in the first part of my video, I introduced the idea that the word obsession was rooted in warfare. And really overcoming OCD is like winning a war. It's a long process, and there's many battles that take place in between, and each exposure that you engage in is like this battle. And every time you forgo giving in to a compulsive behavior and engaging in a compulsive behavior, you've won that battle, right? And then the more battles you win, the closer you're going to get to winning that war and driving OCD out of your life. And that's really the point I want to drive home, is that each day is really this opportunity for you to get better or worse. Because exposures are going to come in your life. And there's two types of exposures, and that's the self-induced kind, which is the ERP, which is you actually going out and facing your fear. And then there's just the natural exposures that happen from day-to-day life, things that trigger you. And so on each of those exposures that you're going to come across, it's really important to look at it like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to get better. And when you take that mindset of like, okay, I'm going to use this moment to get better and try to run OCD out of my life a little bit more and just slowly chip away at it. And the more and more you do that, the more you view each day as this opportunity for you to get better, the more you're going to be willing to engage in exposures, and the more you're going to be willing to forego compulsive behaviors, and eventually you're going to run OCD out of your life, just like I did, and just like many other people have, by using this exact same method. Exposure and response prevention is the number one form and really the cornerstone of how people treat and overcome OCD. So it's a hard process to go through, but it's absolutely worth it. So I really want to encourage you, if this is something that you're going through or going to go through, to really stick with it, because this process is really what's going to change your life. This whole behavioral change of removing compulsive behaviors and habituating to obsessive thoughts, this is really what's going to help you overcome OCD and run it out of your life. So that pretty much wraps up this video on exposure and response prevention. For more information, please check out my website at www.ocdvictory.com. There's also a link right below this video that will take you to the OCD Victory program. And in that program, I really talk about how to set up an exposure hierarchy, and I really kind of walk through how I set up mine and the whole process of going through that, because I know it's a very difficult process and it can be overwhelming. So it's important to have some type of guidance when you're doing this to make sure that you're doing it right. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter for weekly Q&As, and if you have any questions on exposure and response prevention, please send them my way. I want to thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.